My daughter looked me in the eye and erased 32 years of love with 5 words. Don't come to us anymore. She didn't shout it. She didn't scream. She said it with the quiet, devastating finality of a judge passing a death sentence. I nodded. I turned around. I left. But the story didn't end there. In fact, the war was just beginning. To understand the magnitude of that moment, you have to understand the woman I was before the door slammed in my face. For 32 years, mother wasn't just my title, it was my theology. I was a nurse by trade. I spent my days triaging the wounds of strangers, holding the hands of the dying during the AIDS crisis, surviving hospital budget cuts and double shifts. But my real work, my life's great project, was Emma. I raised her alone after my husband died when she was 7. I was the mother who worked the morning shift at the hospital and the evening shift cleaning offices just so she wouldn't have to wear secondhand clothes to prom. I was the safety net that never broke. When she married Derek 5 years ago, I didn't feel the pang of loss most mothers describe. I felt victory. Derek was a sales manager at a tech company, charismatic, ambitious, stable. They were the picture of the American dream I had worked myself to the bone to provide for her. So, when they came to me with the mortgage application, their eyes wide and pleading, I didn't even blink. "It's just a formality, Mom," Emma had said, gripping her coffee cup with both hands. "Our credit history is a little short, that's all. We'll make every payment. You won't have to lift a finger." I signed. Of course I signed. What kind of mother refuses to help her child secure a future? The house was a beautiful colonial, in a neighborhood where the lawns were manicured and the schools were top tier. The monthly payment was $2,800. A steep number, but I had seen Derek's pay stubs. I had verified their savings. I trusted them. For the first year, life was a series of perfect snapshots. Sunday dinners were a sacred ritual. I helped Emma paint the nursery a soft, buttery yellow when she became pregnant with Sophie. I was there for the gender reveal, the baby shower, the milestones. My heart was so full I thought it might burst. I was going to be a grandmother. I had succeeded. But then, the atmosphere began to shift. It wasn't sudden. It was a slow, creeping rot. It started with the texts. Emma, who used to text me novels about her day, started sending one-word replies. Busy, later, can't talk. Sunday dinners moved from every week to every other week, then once a month. When I did visit, Derek would answer the door with a tight, plastic smile, checking his watch as if he were billing me by the minute. The air in that beautiful house grew thick with unspoken tension. "Are you two doing all right financially?" I asked Emma one afternoon, folding a pile of Sophie's onesies. She stiffened, her back to me. "We're fine, Mom. Why would you ask that?" "Just checking on the mortgage. It's a big nut to crack every month." "We're handling it," she snapped, sharper than she intended. Then, catching herself, she softened her voice. "Sorry. Hormones. Everything is under control." I nodded, pretending to believe her. But I had been a nurse for 3 decades. I knew the physiology of a lie. I knew that tension in the shoulders, that refusal to make eye contact. Those were the symptoms of a patient hiding a diagnosis. I started checking my bank account more frequently. I was a cosigner, which meant I could see the payment history if I dug deep enough. But I mostly just monitored the automatic transfers I had set up as a fail-safe backup, just in case. Everything looked quiet. Perhaps I was just being a paranoid old woman, terrified of becoming irrelevant. Then Sophie was born. I rushed to the hospital with a bouquet of hydrangeas and a hand-knitted blanket, ready to weep with joy. Instead, I was met by Derek, standing like a bouncer outside Emma's recovery room. "She needs rest," he said, his voice flat. "Family only right now." I blinked, stunned. "I am her family. I'm her mother." "Immediate family," he clarified, his eyes cold. "Come back tomorrow." I left the hospital feeling like I had been punched in the gut. The next day, a text from Emma. "Mom, Derek thinks we need bonding time as our new family unit. Give us 2 weeks, okay?" 2 weeks stretched into 4. When I finally held my granddaughter, she was 6 weeks old. I had missed the first bath, the first smile, the exhaustion, the magic. I had been erased. And when I was finally allowed back into their orbit, The visits were excruciating. Derek dominated every conversation, loudly complaining about the cost of diapers, formula, daycare. He would look at me pointedly, waiting for me to offer money, but I stayed silent. I was already on the hook for a $425,000 mortgage. Surely that was contribution enough? Then came last Tuesday, the end of the world as I knew it. I arrived at their doorstep at 6 p.m., holding a lasagna dish wrapped in towels, still hot from the oven. It was Emma's childhood favorite extra cheese, homemade sauce. I wanted to bridge the gap. I wanted to be useful. I knocked. Derek opened the door. He didn't step back to let me in. He filled the frame, blocking the view of the hallway. His face was dark, a storm cloud of irritation. "We need to talk," he said. No greeting, no hello. Emma appeared behind him, rocking Sophie in her arms. She looked tired, pale, and crucially, she wouldn't look at me. She was staring at the floorboards. "Mom," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "don't come here anymore. Derek doesn't want you around." I froze. The heat from the lasagna dish was starting to burn my hands through the oven mitts, a physical pain to match the sudden, icy shock in my chest. "What?" I stammered. "Emma, what are you saying?" "You're too controlling," Derek interrupted, stepping forward, invading my personal space. "Always questioning our finances, always questioning our parenting. We're done." "I just want to help," I pleaded, my voice trembling. "I'm your mother." "Don't come back," Emma said, her voice cracking. Then, the most painful sound in the world, the click of the deadbolt sliding home. I stood there for 3 full minutes. I stared at the wreath on the door, a wreath I had helped her make last Christmas, hot gluing the pine cones myself. I stood there until the smell of the cooling lasagna made me nauseous. Then, I nodded to the closed door. I turned. I walked to my car. My hands shook so violently I could barely insert the key into the ignition. I drove home in a silence so loud it rang in my ears. That night, sleep was impossible. I sat in my dark kitchen, staring at the wall, replaying the scene. "You're too controlling," questioning our finances. The phrase stuck in my mind like a splinter. Why that specific accusation? I hadn't asked about money in months. At 3 a.m., driven by a sudden, cold instinct, I opened my laptop. The blue light of the screen illuminated my kitchen table. I logged into my bank portal. My blood ran cold. I had been checking their checking account activity, which I had access to as a co-signer to ensure they had funds. But I hadn't checked the mortgage servicer directly. I clicked on the loan details. Last payment received, March. Status, 90 days delinquent. Foreclosure proceedings, pending. I sat back, gasping for air. January paid, February paid, March paid, and then nothing. April missed, May missed, June missed. I quickly switched tabs to view their bank account. The one I had verified had sufficient funds. The money was there. Every month, $2,800 had been deposited. But instead of going to the bank, it had stayed there. They hadn't lost their jobs. They hadn't faced a medical emergency. They had simply stopped paying. They had kept the money. $2,800 times 3 months. $8,400. They had pocketed nearly $9,000. I clicked over to my credit monitoring app. My score, perfect for 40 years, had plummeted by 89 points. Red flags everywhere. Threatening letters from the bank, letters that had been sent to their address, not mine. They had hidden the notices. They had hidden the theft. And then, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. "Don't come back," Emma had said. It wasn't about boundaries. It wasn't about me being controlling. It was a preemptive strike. They knew the foreclosure notices were about to escalate. They knew the bank was about to call me. They were cutting me off before I could discover the truth. They wanted me out of the picture so they could spin the narrative later. Or perhaps they simply didn't care what happened to me once the ship went down. They had used me. My daughter and her husband had drained my creditworthiness, stolen from me, and then discarded me like trash when I became a liability. I sat in the dark, the humming of the refrigerator the only sound in the house. I wasn't crying. I was past tears. I had been a nurse through epidemics and tragedies. I knew how to stop a bleed. I knew how to resuscitate a heart. But this was a different kind of wound. I reached for a notebook and a pen. My hands, which had been shaking in the car, were steady now. The shock was giving way to something colder, harder, something like steel. Facts. 1. Mortgage, $425,000. 2. Missed payments, 3 months. 3. Total stolen, $8,400. 4. My liability, 100%. They thought they were dealing with a lonely, fragile old woman who would beg for their affection. They thought they could gaslight me into silence. They were wrong. I closed the laptop. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in bruises of purple and red. I didn't know it yet, but the woman who had baked that lasagna was gone. In her place sat someone they had never met before. I made coffee at 4 a.m. My hands were steady now. The tremor from the night before had vanished, replaced by a cold, clinical clarity. I had been a nurse through the height of the AIDS epidemic. I had seen patients wasting away, their bodies betraying them, while their families fought over inheritances in the hallways. I learned early on that panic is useless. In an emergency, you don't scream. You assess the airway. You check the pulse. You stop the bleeding. My daughter and her husband were the hemorrhage, and I was the surgeon. I opened a fresh page in my notebook. The sentimental mother who knitted blankets and baked lasagna was put in a box and shoved to the back of my mind. The woman sitting at the kitchen table now was the one who had survived widowhood and double shifts. I listed the facts again, staring at the numbers until they stopped being numbers and started looking like a diagnosis. Facts. They have the money. They chose not to pay. They hid the notices. They cut me off to buy time. At 9 a.m. sharp, I called the mortgage company. A representative named Patricia answered. "I'm a co-signer on loan number 4472891, I said, my voice flat. "I've discovered the primary borrowers have missed 3 payments." There was a pause, the sound of typing. "Yes, ma'am. The account is seriously delinquent. We've sent multiple notices." "To their address," I said. "Not mine." "That appears to be the primary correspondence address, yes. I need to know my options." Patricia's tone shifted, becoming softer, sympathetic. "As a co-signer, you are equally responsible for the debt. To avoid foreclosure proceedings, you can bring the account current. You could make the payment of $11,200 today." I looked at the Pay Now button on my laptop screen. I had the money in my retirement savings. It would hurt, but I could do it. I could write the check, fix my credit score, and save the house. It was the instinct of a lifetime. Fix it. Save them. But then I remembered the deadbolt sliding shut. Don't come back. "And if I don't?" I asked. "Then foreclosure proceedings will accelerate. The primary borrowers will receive a final demand letter." I took a breath. "Patricia, I have an automatic backup transfer linked to this account from my personal savings. It's set to trigger in the event of a default to protect my credit." "Yes, I see that pending here." "Cancel it." The line went silent for a second. "Ma'am? If you cancel, the default status remains. Your credit. I know the consequences," I said, cutting her off. "Cancel the authorization. Remove my bank account as a payment source completely." "Done," she said, her voice uncertain. "The primary borrowers will be notified immediately that the payment source has been removed." "Good. Thank you, Patricia." I hung up. I stared at the laptop. I had just pulled the plug. The life support was off. Now, they would have to breathe on their own. Was I being vindictive? No, I was being rational. They wanted to be an independent family unit? Fine. Independence costs money. Thursday morning, I sat in the office of Marcus Chen. He was an attorney I'd known socially for years, a man who wore 3-piece suits and had eyes that missed nothing. His office smelled of old paper and expensive leather. "Barbara," Marcus said, reviewing the printouts of the bank statements I'd brought, "this is textbook financial exploitation. It's unfortunately common." He looked over his reading glasses at me. "But I want to be clear. You have the right to stop paying. You also have the right to sue them for the missed payments that damaged your credit. Can I prove they stole from me? You have the text messages where they promised to pay. You have the bank statements showing they had the funds, but diverted them to personal use. That implies intent to deceive. He leaned back. But the real question is, what is your end game? Do you want the money, or do you want to teach them a lesson? I want them to understand that they cannot use people, I said. I want my name off that loan. Then here is the strategy, Marcus said, tapping the desk. Withhold payment. The bank will contact them. Panic will set in. They will need $11,200 immediately to stop the foreclosure clock. They don't have it. You do. When they come crawling back, and they will, that is your leverage to force a refinance or a sale. I left his office with a strategy and a spine made of iron. The fallout began on Friday afternoon. I was at the grocery store, buying ingredients for a pot roast comfort food I intended to cook for myself when my phone buzzed. Emma. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, Emma. Then a text. Mom, there's an issue with the bank. Call me as soon as possible. I stared at the screen in the produce aisle, holding a bag of carrots. The audacity was breathtaking. They hadn't spoken to me in weeks except to banish me. Now, the moment the money stopped flowing, I was mom again. Another text. Mom, did you cancel the backup payment? What is going on? I took a screenshot of the texts and sent them to Marcus. His reply was immediate. Do not engage. Let them sit with the anxiety. I turned off my phone. I went home, seasoned my roast, poured a glass of red wine, and sat in my living room. I waited. At 7:15 p.m., the hammering started. It wasn't a knock. It was a violent pounding that shook the doorframe. I saw them through the peephole. Derek's face was red, contorted with rage. Emma stood behind him, holding Sophie, looking terrified. I opened the door, but I kept the security chain latched. The gap was only 4 inches wide. Yes? I asked calmly. What the hell did you do? Derek screamed. The profanity shocked me. In 5 years, he had never raised his voice to me. Now, he looked like he wanted to tear the door off its hinges. The bank called us, he shouted, spit flying. They said the backup payment was canceled. They're threatening foreclosure. Lower your voice, I said, my tone ice cold. You are frightening your daughter. Answer the question. He shoved against the door. The chain held. Emma stepped into the sliver of view. Mom, please, why would you do this? We could lose the house. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. You could lose the house, Emma? You stopped paying 3 months ago. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Emma's face went pale. What? No, we were. I saw the bank statements. I cut in. You've been depositing the mortgage money into your savings account. You've been spending it. You've been stealing from me while relying on my backup transfer to save you. We were going to catch up, Emma cried, the tears flowing instantly. We just needed a few months to save. Save for what? I asked. Your account balance went up by $9,000. You weren't struggling. You were hoarding. And you lied to my face. Derek's anger shifted from hot rage to cold calculation. You're a co-signer, Barbara. If we lose this house, your credit is destroyed too. You'll lose everything. Is that what you want? To burn it all down just to spite us? My credit is already damaged by your 3 months of silence, I replied. I've consulted an attorney. I have options. You, on the other hand, need to come up with $11,000 in 30 days. We don't have that kind of money, Emma sobbed. Then you shouldn't have spent 3 months stealing it. I started to close the door. Derek slammed his palm against the wood. You vindictive old witch, he snarled. We invited you into our lives. We let you be a grandmother. And this is how you repay us? The manipulation was so clumsy, it was almost funny. You told me not to come back, I reminded him. You said I was controlling. You cut me out. That was your choice. This, I gestured to his panicked face, this is the consequence. We'll sue you, Derek threatened, for elder abuse, for abandoning your financial obligation. My attorney welcomes that lawsuit, I said. It would give us a chance to show the judge the fraud you've committed. Do you really want to go there, Derek? He froze. He knew he had lost. Come on. He grabbed Emma's arm, roughly pulling her away. We're not begging this bitter woman for anything. Mom! Emma wailed as he dragged her toward the car. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I slid the chain back into place. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked to the bathroom sink and gripped the porcelain until my knuckles turned white. I dry heaved, my body reacting to the adrenaline crash. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But as I washed my face with cold water, looking at my pale reflection in the mirror, I realized something. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the one holding the keys. The silence in my house after they left was deafening. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a battlefield after the shooting stops. I had won the skirmish, but the war was far from over. I needed to get out. That night, I called my sister, Helen, in Arizona. Helen was the firecracker of the family. Divorced twice, owned a pottery studio, took zero nonsense from anyone. I told her everything. The missing payments, the hidden money, the confrontation at the door. "Pack a bag," Helen said, her voice cutting through my panic. "Come here, now." "I can't just leave, Helen. The bank, the house." "The bank isn't going anywhere. Neither is the house. But you are about to crack. You need distance, Barbara. Strategic distance." She was right. Being in that house, waiting for the next knock, the next screaming match, it was killing me. I booked a flight for the next morning. Arizona was a different planet. The dry heat, the endless red rocks, the vast, empty sky. It stripped you down. Helen and I spent the days hiking until our legs burned, drinking cheap wine on her patio and watching the sunset bleed across the desert. I turned off my phone. When I turned it on once a day to check for emergencies, the notifications piled up like wreckage. 17 missed calls from Emma, 22 texts from Derek, voicemails ranging from weeping apologies to thinly veiled threats. I didn't answer a single one. "Let them stew," Marcus, my attorney, had advised via email. "Silence is the loudest thing you can say right now." By the time I flew home a week later, the desert had baked something out of me. The fear was gone. The guilt, that persistent, nagging mother's guilt, was quieter. I felt like steel that had been tempered in fire. But the enemy had been busy while I was away. When I walked into my house, I saw a white envelope on the floor, slipped through the mail slot. It had been hand-delivered. Emma's handwriting. I sat at my kitchen table and opened it. It was 3 pages long, a masterpiece of emotional manipulation. "Mom," it began, "I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you. But please remember who we are to each other." She invoked every memory I held sacred. The time I stayed up all night when she broke her arm in the 3rd grade, the way I held her hair back when she had morning sickness, my promise on her wedding day to always be there. "Derek made bad decisions," she wrote, neatly shifting the blame. "He convinced me to skip the payments temporarily. I was weak to agree. But Mom, we are still a family. Sophie is your granddaughter." She points at your photo and asks for Nana. "Do you really want her to grow up without you over money?" And the kicker, the final line designed to twist the knife. "You taught me that love is more important than anything else. Please, let's fix this. Don't throw us away." I read it 3 times. The old Barbara, the one from 2 weeks ago, would have been sobbing. She would have called immediately, ready to forgive, ready to write the check just to hear her daughter's voice again. But the new Barbara? I saw the letter for what it was, a weapon. It wasn't an apology. There was no plan to pay me back. No mention of the stolen $8,400. No offer to fix my credit. It was just a demand for unconditional surrender, wrapped in the language of love. You can love someone and still refuse to let them destroy you. Helen's words echoed in my head. I took a photo of the letter and sent it to Marcus. "File this," I wrote. The next morning, I went to my weekly church coffee group. I had missed it for months, too ashamed of the drama, too busy worrying. But today, I needed noise. I needed people. When I walked in, Margaret, a retired judge with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue, waved me over. "Barbara, we thought you'd joined the witness protection program." I sat down, clutching my styrofoam cup. And then, surprisingly, I spilled everything. I told them about the mortgage, the lies, the don't come back, the confrontation. I expected judgment. I expected them to ask, "But isn't she your daughter?" Instead, the table erupted in nods of grim recognition. My son did the same thing with credit cards, Patricia whispered. Ran up $20,000 in my name. I had to threaten police action. Family is the most dangerous investment, Margaret said, her voice hard. Because we lower our defenses. You are doing the right thing, Barbara. They need consequences, or they will never change. You aren't being cruel, you are being a parent. It was the validation I didn't know I needed. I wasn't a monster, I was a survivor. 3 days later, the peace offering arrived. It was Sunday morning. I was in the garden, wearing my old, oversized shirt and pruning the roses, when a car pulled up. It wasn't the angry, speeding arrival of the last visit. This was slow, tentative. Emma and Derek got out. They were dressed for church. Derek was holding a bouquet of red roses, my favorite. Emma was carrying Sophie, who was wearing a dress I had bought her. Mom? Emma called out, her voice bright, hopeful. Can we talk, please? Every alarm bell in my head started ringing. This is a trap. But curiosity is a powerful thing. I wanted to see what their next move was. I wanted to know if the foreclosure threat had actually changed them. You have 15 minutes, I said, pulling off my gardening gloves. We sat in the living room. It felt like a stage play. Derek placed the roses on the coffee table with exaggerated care. Emma bounced Sophie on her lap, positioning the baby so she was facing me, reaching out with chubby hands. Look at what you're missing, the gesture said. We came to apologize, Emma started. Truly. We got overwhelmed with expenses. We made terrible decisions. We should never have stopped the payments. We were embarrassed, Derek added, his voice humble, his head bowed. Pride is a killer, Barbara. I didn't want to admit I couldn't provide. So we panicked. We managed to scrape the money together, Emma said, rushing to the good news. Derek's parents helped us. We paid the arrearage this morning. We're current. Everything is okay. I sat back. Derek's parents, the Torres family. They were good people, hardworking, honest. You borrowed $12,000 from Christine and Robert? I asked. They wanted to help, Derek said quickly. They understand that family sticks together. And what did you tell them? I asked. Did you tell them you stopped paying for 3 months while keeping the money? Or did you tell them I cut you off? Derek shifted in his seat. We told them there was a misunderstanding with the bank transfers. The details aren't important. The point is, it's fixed. And we want to move forward, Emma said, leaning in. We want you back, Mom. Sunday dinners, visits. Let's put this ugly chapter behind us. Sophie needs her Nana. I looked at my granddaughter. She was beautiful. My heart ached to hold her. It would be so easy to say yes, to pretend the last month hadn't happened, to accept the flowers and the lies, and go back to being the ATM with a pulse. And the mortgage? I asked quietly. What happens next month? And the month after? We'll handle it, Derek said, waving a hand. We've learned our lesson. We're going to be better. You didn't answer my question, I said. You haven't offered to pay me back for the damage to my credit. You haven't offered to remove my name from the loan. You haven't shown me a budget. You've just shown up with flowers and someone else's money. We're trying to make peace, Emma cried, her voice rising. Why do you have to be so difficult? Because trust is currency, I said, standing up. And you are bankrupt. I looked Derek in the eye. You lied to your parents to get that money, didn't you? You didn't tell them about the theft. It wasn't theft, Derek snapped, the humble act vanishing instantly. It was our money. It was money earmarked for a debt I am liable for. That makes it theft. I pointed to the door. Get out. You're unbelievable, Derek sneered, standing up. My mother was right. You really are losing it. I froze. What did you say? Nothing, he muttered, realizing he'd slipped. He grabbed Emma's arm. Come on. She wants to die alone? Let her. Mom. Emma tried one last time, tears welling up. Go, I said. They left. The door slammed. The silence returned. But this time, I wasn't shaking. I was thinking, my mother was right. You really are losing it. What had they told the Torres family? I picked up the phone. I didn't call Emma. I didn't call Marcus. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Hello, Christine? I said when the voice answered. "This is Barbara. We need to talk about your son." The call with Christine Torres was short, clinical, and devastating. "Is this Barbara?" Her voice was sharp, the voice of a woman who didn't tolerate ambiguity. "Yes, Christine, it's been a long time." "It has. Listen, Barbara, I'm going to be direct. We just gave Derek and Emma $12,000 to cover the mortgage. They told us you had stopped paying, that you were having a mental health episode." I gripped the phone tighter. "A mental health episode?" "They said you were exhibiting signs of dementia," Christine continued, her tone unreadable. "That you had become paranoid and vindictive, and that you cut off the payments out of spite because you were confused." They painted a very tragic picture of a grandmother losing her grip on reality. The room spun. Dementia. That was their angle. They hadn't just stolen my money, they were actively dismantling my reputation, my sanity, to cover their tracks. They were willing to declare me incompetent to explain why the mortgage had defaulted. "That is a lie," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "I suspected as much," Christine said. "Because yesterday, before I wrote that check, I did something they didn't expect. I called the mortgage company myself, and then I ran a credit check on my own son. And I found the truth. I found the missed payments. I found the luxury spending on their bank statements, statements they foolishly left on my kitchen counter. And Barbara, I found something else. Hard inquiries on Robert's credit report. They were trying to open credit cards in his name." The silence on the line was heavy. We weren't just two mothers anymore. We were two victims. "What do we do?" I asked. "We stop them," Christine said. "Tonight, my house or yours?" "Mine," I said. "This started here. It ends here." That evening, my small living room was transformed into a courtroom. I had asked Marcus Chen to attend. He sat in the corner, a silent sentinel in a gray suit, a legal pad on his knee. Christine and her husband, Robert, sat on the love seat. Robert looked aged, defeated. Christine looked like a coiled spring. When Emma and Derek arrived, they walked in with a bounce in their step. They thought they were coming to finalize the truce. They thought the check from Christine had fixed the problem and that I had been cowed into submission. They froze when they saw the assembly. "Mom," Emma said, looking from me to Christine. "What's going on? Why is everyone here?" "Sit down," I said. They sat. Derek looked at his parents, forcing a smile. "Mom, Dad, good to see you. I thought we were just talking to Barbara about the schedule for Sunday dinners." "There will be no Sunday dinners," Christine said. Her voice was ice. "Derek, explain to everyone in this room why you missed 3 mortgage payments." Derek cleared his throat, shifting into salesman mode. "Well, like we told you," Barbara was confused. "She canceled the backup transfer and—" "Stop," Christine snapped. "We know Barbara didn't cancel the transfer until after she discovered the default. We know you stopped paying 3 months ago. We know you kept the money." Derek's eyes darted around the room. That's not true. We were struggling. We barely had money for groceries." Marcus Chen cleared his throat. It was a soft sound, but it commanded the room. He lifted a piece of paper. "I have here the bank statements for the months of April, May, and June. Total deposits, $18,000. Total mortgage payments, 0. Discretionary spending, $8,400. He adjusted his glasses. Steakhouse dinners, designer baby clothes, a weekend trip to a spa resort in May. "Is this what you call struggling, Mr. Torres?" Emma made a small, strangled noise. She looked at me, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You gave them our bank statements?" "I gave them the truth," I said. "You told them I had dementia, Emma. You told them I was crazy." We were worried about you," Emma stammered. "You were acting so irrational." I was acting like a person who realized she was being robbed. I shot back. "You slandered me to your in-laws to get $12,000 out of them. And you," I looked at Derek, "you were planning to do to them exactly what you did to me." Robert spoke for the first time. His voice was shaking. "Son, did you try to open a credit card in my name?" Derek turned pale. "No, Dad, never. That must be a mistake." "We have the inquiry alerts, Derek," Christine said quietly. "Identity theft. Against your own father." The air left the room. The facade of the struggling young family collapsed completely. What remained were two grifters who had been caught red-handed. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Emma sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "We just wanted a good life. It's so expensive. Everyone else has nice things. Why couldn't we?" "So you stole from your mother?" Christine asked. "You were willing to destroy her financial future so you could have nice things?" "She has plenty of money," Derek shouted, finally snapping. He stood up, his face red. "Look at this house. Look at her savings. She doesn't need it. We needed it. We have a child." "And that," I said, standing to meet him, "is exactly why you are dangerous. You think you are entitled to what is mine." I turned to Marcus. "Tell them the terms." Marcus stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. "Here is the offer. 1. You will refinance the home immediately to remove Barbara's name from the loan. 2. You will repay the $8,400 you diverted, plus legal fees. 3. You will submit to a full financial audit by a third party chosen by your parents." "We can't refinance," Emma cried. "Our credit score is tanked. We won't qualify." "Then you sell the house," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. "Sell it?" Emma whispered. "But it's our home. It's Sophie's home. It's a home you cannot afford and did not pay for," I said. "You have 30 days to list it. If you don't, Marcus files a civil suit for fraud, financial abuse, and slander, and Robert files a police report for identity theft." Derek looked at his father. "Dad, you wouldn't." Robert looked away, tears in his eyes. "You tried to steal my identity, son. You left me no choice." "Those are the terms," I said. "Take them, or we go to court. And believe me, Derek, after what you said about my mental health, I will enjoy watching you explain yourself to a judge." Derek looked at Emma. Emma looked at the floor. The fight drained out of them. They weren't master criminals. They were just greedy, entitled children who had finally hit a wall they couldn't manipulate their way over. "We'll sell," Derek muttered. "Good," Christine said. "Now get out of Barbara's house." They left without another word. No, "I love you." No, "I'm sorry." Just the shuffle of defeat. When the door closed, Robert put his head in his hands and wept. Christine put a hand on his shoulder, her own face a mask of stoic pain. I sat down, exhausted. I looked at Marcus, who gave me a small, grim nod. "You did it," he said softly. "I won," I whispered. But as I looked at the shattered parents on my love seat, I realized the cost of the victory. We had saved our finances, but we had lost our children. The family was broken. "Thank you, Barbara," Christine said, after a long moment, wiping her eyes, "for having the courage to call me. We're the only ones who can protect each other," I said. "The mothers." We sat there for a long time, 3 survivors in a quiet room, mourning the people we thought our children were, and accepting the reality of who they actually had become. The house went on the market in February. It sold in March. The real estate market had cooled, and after realtor fees, closing costs, and the penalties for breaking the mortgage early, Emma and Derek walked away with almost nothing. The equity they thought they were building had been eaten alive by their own mismanagement. They moved into a cramped 2-bedroom apartment across town. I didn't visit. I saw the address on the legal documents Marcus handled. That was enough. The refinancing process, or rather, the sale process, was the final surgery. It severed the financial artery connecting me to them. When the closing documents were signed and my name was finally, officially removed from that loan, I didn't feel joy. I felt a profound, exhausting relief, like putting down a heavy backpack I had been carrying for 5 years. But the consequences I had set in motion continued to ripple outward, uncontrollable and indifferent to anyone's feelings. Christine's forensic audit of their finances revealed even more rot. Unpaid credit card balances, a loan from Derek's brother they had never mentioned, bills and collections hidden in drawers. The pressure of the audit, combined with the forced sale of the house, cracked the foundation of Emma and Derek's marriage. It turned out their relationship was built on the shaky ground of shared delusion. Without the money to fund their lifestyle, without the nice things to distract them, they turned on each other. Derek blamed Emma for not managing me better. He resented her for not securing the bailout. Emma blamed Derek for the scheme in the first place, for the gambling debts that surfaced during the audit. Apparently, the investments he often spoke of were actually sports bets. They separated in May. Emma moved into a studio apartment with Sophie. She had to sell most of their furniture to cover the deposit. Derek moved back in with his parents, but this time, the terms were strict. He was paying rent. He was in credit counseling. He was attending Gamblers Anonymous. I learned all of this through Christine. We met for lunch once a month. It was a strange ritual, two grandmothers dissecting the wreckage of their children's lives over Cobb salads. She's working at a call center now, Christine told me one afternoon in June. Emma, she's trying to find a second job. Sophie is in a subsidized daycare. I stared at my iced tea. My granddaughter in subsidized daycare. My daughter working double shifts. The image twisted my stomach. The urge to fix it rose up in my throat like bile. I could send a check. I could pay for a better daycare. I could. Don't, Christine said, reading my mind. If you save her now, she learns nothing. She needs to know she can survive on her own. That is the only way she becomes an adult. I nodded. It was the hardest discipline of my life, to sit on my hands while my child struggled. But I remembered the lie about dementia. I remembered the theft. I remembered, don't come back. And I stayed silent. 2 years later, I sold the big house. It was too full of ghosts, too full of memories of the little girl Emma used to be. I downsized to a condo near the coast, bright, airy, with a balcony that smelled of salt water. My mortgage was tiny. My savings, protected from the drain of the Torres family drama, had recovered. I started living the life I had deferred for decades. I joined a book club. I took watercolor classes. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier named Pepper, who slept at the foot of my bed and didn't care about my credit score. I even traveled. I went to Italy with a tour group of seniors. I stood in the Sistine Chapel and wept at the beauty of it. I drank wine in Tuscany and laughed with women who had their own scars, their own stories of family betrayal and survival. My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. A woman named Martha told me one night in Florence. She wanted my retirement fund for a business idea. I said no. Do you regret it? I asked. Every day, she said honestly. But I'd regret being destitute more. We have to be the protagonists of our own lives, Barbara, not just the supporting characters in theirs. That stuck with me. The protagonist of my own life. Emma tried to reach out twice. The first time was on my birthday. A text. Happy birthday, Mom. I miss you. Can we talk? I didn't respond. I wasn't ready. The wound was scabbed over, but it wasn't healed. The second time was last Christmas. A card arrived in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a photo of Sophie. She was 5 now. She looked so much like Emma at that age, the same bright eyes, the same mischievous smile. On the back, Emma had written, "She asks about you. I tell her you love her, but you're far away. I'm working hard, Mom. I'm doing it on my own. No handouts. Just wanted you to know." I sat on my balcony, holding the photo, listening to the ocean. I'm doing it on my own. That was the victory. Not the lawsuit. Not the sale of the house. That she was struggling. Yes. She was tired. Yes. But she was standing on her own 2 feet. She was learning the value of a dollar earned, not stolen. She was becoming the woman I always hoped she would be, even if she had to hate me to do it. I didn't reply to the card. Not yet. Maybe someday, when the lesson had fully taken root, when the anger had faded into wisdom, we could meet for coffee. Maybe I would get to know Sophie, not as an ATM machine, but as a grandmother. But not today. Today, I had a watercolor class. Today, I had a walk on the beach with Pepper. Today, I had peace. I realized then what I had truly learned. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-destruction. Family doesn't give anyone a pass to exploit you. And sometimes, the most loving thing a mother can do is let her child fall so they can learn how to stand up. I put the photo of Sophie on my fridge next to a postcard from Italy. I was Barbara. I was whole. I was free. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.